Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend, Mr. Fused Fiction Hub, bringing you another amazing story. This is the next part in A Bizarre Encounter. I am the author of this story, so let's begin. Chapter 4, Starstruck and Behind Bars, Jotaro's Ghostly Encounter. Jotaro sighed as he walked down the street, trying to ignore the group of girls that were trailing him. Jojo, hey Jojo, so who are you going to kiss? Jojo, is it me Jojo? I have the body for it. Hey, look at Jojo. What? Jojo, you're right. It's Jojo. Jojo. Hey, Jojo, what's up? Jojo. He tried to focus on the ease of the school day, but their incessant chatter was making it difficult. Suddenly, he heard one of the girls say, "Hey, who do you think you are grabbing off to Jojo like that? I don't like how friendly you're getting with him. Stay away." Jotaro turned around to see what was going on and saw that one of the girls was trying to get a little too close to him. He shook his head and muttered, "What the?" The girls continued to make snarky comments, and Jotaro had finally had enough. "Shut up, you annoying vixens," he snapped. The girls screamed and moaned in response. Thrilled that Jotaro had actually acknowledged them, he rolled his eyes and continued on his way, trying to put as much distance between himself and the group of girls as possible. Jotaro ran and hid behind a nearby building as the girls passed by calling, "Where's Jojo?" He waited there for 10 seconds. He went to leave. Jotaro's heart raced as he felt the cold metal of the knife pressing against his skin. He tried to remain calm and slowly turned to face the guy in the biker jacket. "I'm just heading home," Jotaro said, his voice shaking slightly. The guy in the biker jacket chuckled and grabbed Jotaro's collar, pulling him closer. "You're not going anywhere until you give us your money," he said, his breath reeking of alcohol. Jotaro felt a bead of sweat trickle down his forehead as he saw the other 3 guys closing in on him. He scanned the area for any possible escape route, but there was none. He was trapped. He took a deep breath and stood his ground. "I don't have any money," he said firmly. "Now let me go." The leader of the group, the one with the baseball bat, stepped forward and sneered at Jotaro. "Don't lie to us, kid. We can smell money from a mile away. You're gonna give us everything you have, or we'll make you regret it." Jotaro's heart was pounding as he quickly assessed the situation. He knew he had to act fast to get out of this predicament. He clenched his fists and prepared himself for a fight. The tall, muscular guy with the nunchuck was the first to attack. Jotaro quickly dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the weapon. He knew that he needed to get the nunchuck away from him, so he made a move to grab it. As he reached for the weapon, he felt a sharp pain in his back. The short guy with the knuckle bracers had landed a punch. Jotaro gritted his teeth and retaliated with a powerful kick, sending the short guy rolling across the pavement. The leader of the group swung his baseball bat at Jotaro's head, but Jotaro was ready. He reached out and yanked the bat out of the leader's grip, causing him to stumble and fall over. Jotaro took a step back, his eyes scanning the group. He saw that the leader was now brandishing a chain. The tall one with the nunchucks was swinging them around dangerously, and the short one with the knuckle bracers was getting up. Jotaro knew he had to be quick and decisive. He dodged the chain as it whizzed past his face, then kicked the tall guy in the shin. The guy howled in pain and dropped the nunchucks, which Jotaro quickly grabbed. He twirled them around once, getting a feel for their weight, then swung them at the leader's head. The leader tried to block it with his bat, but Jotaro was too fast. The nunchucks knocked the bat out of his hand and he stumbled back, dazed. Jotaro took advantage of the leader's momentary confusion and punched him in the face, sending him reeling backwards. The short guy with the knuckle bracers lunged at him, but Jotaro sidestepped and kicked him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Jotaro stood there, breathing heavily, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The group lay on the ground, groaning in pain. Jotaro looked around, making sure there were no other attackers lurking nearby. He picked up his school bag, which had fallen during the fight, and started to walk away, his heart still pounding. As he walked, he realized that he was bleeding from a cut on his cheek where the knife had nicked him. He pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it to his face. The 4 men tried to sneak attack him again. Without thinking, Jotaro acted quickly and grabbed the leader, intending to pull him aside. But with a loud crack, he broke the man's hand and arm. Jotaro had been in fights before and knew how to defend himself. However, he couldn't prepare himself for what came next. The short guy lunged at him and kicked him with tremendous force, causing some of his ribs to crack. Jotaro lay on the ground, unable to move. That's when the tall muscular guy came from behind and grabbed him. Jotaro tried to struggle, but he was in the air, and his arms were useless. He quickly assessed the situation and kicked the guy's shin, which caused him to fall to the ground with a crack. But there was still one more guy to deal with. Jotaro knew that he had to act fast, but before he could do anything, the guy was sneaking up on him with lightning-fast reflexes. Without hesitation, Jotaro punched the guy in the face, breaking his nose. The guy grabbed his nose in pain, but Jotaro wasn't done yet. He punched the guy in the gut, and with a loud crack, he broke some of his ribs. As the guy fell to the ground, Jotaro walked over to the leader and squatted down. "If you ever mess with me again, I will make it worse," he said with a stern voice. He grabbed the man's hands and proceeded to break each finger one by one. Jotaro knew that this would send a message and hopefully prevent any future confrontations. Jotaro walked away from the scene of the fight, his handkerchief still pressed against his bleeding cheek. His mind was racing as he replayed the events in his head, the way he had broken bones with such ease and the way he had moved with lightning-fast reflexes. It didn't feel natural to him. As he walked past shop windows, he caught glimpses of a faint aura surrounding him. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating, but the aura persisted. Jotaro felt a chill run down his spine. Was he possessed by an evil spirit? It was a concept he had heard of in stories and folklore, but he had never thought it could be real. Jotaro couldn't bear the thought of hurting someone again because of this mysterious aura. He knew he had to do something about it. After contemplating his options, he made his way to the police station. He walked up to the reception desk and explained his situation to the officer on duty. Jotaro sat on the cold metal bench inside the cell, staring blankly at the walls. He had turned himself into the police station, but now he was starting to wonder if that was the right decision. The aura he had been seeing around himself had been growing stronger, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was possessed by an evil spirit. He leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He couldn't explain what was happening to him, but he knew it was something beyond his control. He had never believed in supernatural things before, but now he was starting to doubt everything he thought he knew. The sound of footsteps outside the cell door made him open his eyes. A uniformed police officer walked in, looking at him with a mix of suspicion and confusion. "What's your story, kid?" the officer asked. Jotaro hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't know how to explain it, but I think I'm possessed by something. I've been seeing this aura around myself and I feel like I'm not in control of my own actions." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "You expect me to believe that? You know how many crazy people we get in here claiming to be possessed?" Jotaro sighed, knowing how ridiculous it must sound. "I know, but I had to do something. I can't just ignore this and hope it goes away." The officer shook his head. "Well, I don't know what to tell you. We can't just let you go based on your word alone. You'll have to wait here until we figure out what to do with you." Several hours passed, and Jotaro could hear the sounds of officers coming and going in the station. The guard came back with a clipboard. "Jotaro, did you beat up 4 gang members?" "Yes, but it was in defense. I didn't know my strength. The evil spirit magnified my strength," Jotaro said. "The 4 gang members are in the hospital. We examined them. You broke 15 bones. Their story checks out, and you are free to go," said the officer, unlocking the cell door. But Jotaro didn't move. "I can't go," he said, looking up at the guard. "I need to get this spirit out of me." The guard looked at him skeptically, but Jotaro could tell he was a little unnerved. He was used to dealing with small-time criminals, not someone claiming to be possessed by a supernatural force. Meanwhile, Holly Joestar was beside herself with worry. She had always been concerned about Jotaro's safety, but this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She answered the phone to hear the voice of a police officer on the other end. "Is this?" "Yes," she said. "Your son Jotaro is in a cell at the local police station. We will go over the details in the morning." She let out a cry of anguish and sank into a chair, her mind racing with questions and fears. What had happened to Jotaro? Was he hurt? Would he be okay? Jotaro sat in his cell, twirling the remote control car in his hand. He had gotten used to the strange occurrences that had been happening since he discovered his evil spirit. He didn't fully understand what was happening to him, but he knew that he could control things with his mind. As he played with the remote control car, the other prisoners in the cell block stayed away from him. They had heard the rumors about the crazy guy who beat up 4 gang members, and they didn't want any trouble. Suddenly, Jotaro's evil spirit spoke to him. A series of auras came out which meant "play with me, Jotaro." It hesitated, unsure if he wanted to entertain the strange entity inside him, but eventually gave in to its demands. He began to play with the remote control car. As Jotaro played with the remote control car, his evil spirit continued to bring him items. It brought him a Rubik's Cube, a deck of cards, and even a small box TV. The officers who were on duty that night looked skeptical as they watched the strange happenings in Jotaro's cell. Finally, after several hours of playing with his evil spirit, Jotaro grew tired. He lay down on his bunk and closed his eyes, trying to ignore the strange presence inside him. As he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help but wonder what was going to happen to him now that he was locked up in a cell with his evil spirit. As they walked down the hallway of the police station, Holly couldn't help but feel worried about her son. She was eager to see him and find out what was going on. The police officer, who had been assigned to her, began to explain the situation. "So, Mrs. Kujo, your son Jotaro was involved in an altercation with 4 gang members. He broke 15 of their bones, but claims it was in self-defense and that he is possessed by an evil spirit. We examined the gang members, and they corroborated his story. It's a strange case, the officer said. Holly listened intently, trying to process the information. She had never heard Jotaro mention anything about an evil spirit before. She couldn't wait, so she ran down the hall. As Holly hurriedly made her way down the corridor of cells, her heart pounded with worry about her son. Flashes of memories from Jotaro's childhood flooded her mind, causing a mix of emotions to well up within her. She remembered a vivid image of Jotaro as a young boy, kicking a ball around in their backyard. She would cheer him on, urging him to throw the ball to her, their laughter filling the air. The memory brought a bittersweet smile to her face as she continued running. Another memory emerged, this time from Jotaro's middle school years. She recalled standing by the track field, anxiously wishing him luck before a crucial race. The excitement and nervousness in her voice were palpable, and she found herself reliving the intensity of that moment as if it were happening again. A third memory surfaced, this one of Jotaro donning his high school uniform after passing the challenging writing exam. She vividly remembered offering to cook his favorite meal to celebrate his achievement. The joy and pride in her voice as she congratulated him washed over her once more. Lost in the rush of memories, Holly couldn't help but let out a desperate cry, her voice echoing through the corridors. "Jotaro!" she called out, her concern and love for her son reverberating in her words. Finally, she reached the cell where Jotaro was being held. The sight of him there, surrounded by the cold walls, struck her with a pang of anguish. She stepped closer, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and maternal affection. "You're so annoying." Jotaro's sudden outburst startled Holly. The words stung, contrasting sharply with the memories she had just relieved. She stopped smiling, saying okay. She knew he still loved him. "Jotaro, are you okay?" Holly asked, worry etched on her face. Jotaro stood up and nodded, but didn't say anything. Holly looked around the cell and noticed the strange items that were scattered all over the floor. "What's all this?" she asked, gesturing towards the items. "My evil spirit brought them to me," Jotaro said calmly. Holly's eyes widened in surprise. She had heard of evil spirits before, but never in the context of her own son. She didn't know what to say. "Can you describe the evil spirit to me?" said Holly. Jotaro nodded. "It's a humanoid figure, a broken bar." Joseph sat at his desk, deep in thought, when his phone began to ring. He picked it up and answered with a cheery hello, but instead of a greeting, he was met with a long pause, followed by a loud cry from the other end. His daughter Holly's voice was shaking as she spoke. "Dad, it's Jotaro," she said urgently. "He's in trouble. He gained the stand while beating up some thugs, and he is in a cell to protect everybody. I don't know what to do." Joseph's brow furrowed as he listened to his daughter's distress. He knew that stands were powerful and dangerous, and if Jotaro couldn't control his, it could spell disaster. "All right, Holly, don't worry, we'll take care of it," Joseph reassured her. He immediately called for his private plane to be prepared, instructing the pilot to get it ready for takeoff as soon as possible. He knew that time was of the essence. He turned to Avdol and Suzuki, who were both in the room with him, and told them what was going on. "We need to go to Japan and help Jotaro," he said gravely. Avdol and Suzuki nodded, knowing the gravity of the situation. They all quickly gathered their belongings and boarded their private plane, ready to fly to Japan and help Jotaro with his stand problem. Chapter 5, From Luck to Lurking Cars, a stone-cold encounter. The Saiyans had been traveling through space for months, searching for a new home. Suddenly, they found themselves passing through a wormhole, and everything around them began to warp and twist. As they emerged on the other side, the Saiyans looked out at their new surroundings, taking in the strange and unfamiliar landscape. "Where are we?" King Vegeta asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I'm not sure," Bardock replied, studying the readings on the ship's monitor, "but it looks like we've passed through a wormhole into a completely different part of the universe." The Saiyans gazed out at the unknown expanse before them, wondering what other mysteries and dangers lay ahead on their journey. An asteroid was hit. The Saiyans felt a sudden jolt and alarms went off in their ships. "What was that?" asked Gas, looking at the monitor. "It was an asteroid, but it looks like it's not just any asteroid," replied Granola. King Vegeta ordered his crew to investigate the asteroid and see if it posed any danger to them. The crew worked quickly to activate the ship's external cameras, and a view of the asteroid appeared on the monitor. Everyone gasped in surprise as they saw the asteroid more clearly. It was a majestic figure with golden wings. It was gripping what looked like a hand, and upon closer inspection, they noticed that the statue was buried within the asteroid. "What is that?" asked Paragus. "It looks like some kind of statue," said Brawly, "but it's not like any statue I've ever seen before." "But, I've heard stories about this asteroid. It's said to be a place of great power, and that whoever possesses it will be blessed with immense strength and good fortune." The Heaters nodded in agreement. Elec said yes. The legend of the Golden Angel is well known among the galaxy's elite. It's said that the angel will choose a worthy warrior to be its guardian. The Saiyans exchanged skeptical glances, but King Vegeta spoke up. "It doesn't matter if it's true or not." Brawly stepped forward. "I'll be the guardian," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Everyone turned to look at him, Surprised by his sudden declaration, Paragus stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Are you sure about this, my boy?" Brawly nodded, a fierce determination in his eyes. "Yes, I've always known that I was destined for greatness. This is my chance to prove it." The Saiyans looked at each other, uncertain about what to make of Brawly's newfound confidence. But King Vegeta nodded approvingly. "Very well, Brawly, you shall be the guardian of the Golden Angel. Let's see what this brings us." As they landed on the asteroid, they could see that it was indeed a statue, but it looked like it was made of stone, and it had a strange, almost otherworldly aura around it. "This is giving me the creeps," said Heater, looking around nervously. They activated the special atmosphere generator before opening the medship doors. "All right, everyone," said King Vegeta. "We need to carefully dig our way to the statue. We don't want to damage it in the process." The crew got to work, using their advanced technology to create a tunnel towards the center of the asteroid. It was slow going, as they had to be extremely cautious not to damage the statue, but eventually, they reached their destination. Carefully, they began to excavate the area around the statue. Piece by piece, they removed chunks of rock and debris until the entire figure was revealed. Suddenly, the statue started to move, and the Saiyans jumped back in surprise. "What is going on?" shouted King Vegeta. "Is this some kind of trap?" As the dust settled, they could see that the statue had transformed into a strange-looking man with long, flowing hair and a menacing expression on his face. "Who are you?" asked King Vegeta, his hand on his sword. The man looked at them with disdain. "I am Cars, the ultimate being," he said. "And you are nothing but insects compared to me." The Saiyans looked at each other in confusion. "What is he talking about?" whispered Granola. "I don't know, but we need to be careful," replied Heater. Cars suddenly flew into a rage and attacked the Saiyans with incredible speed and strength. They fought back. Cars' skin took on the aspects of a turtle shell as King Vegeta swung his sword. It shattered on impact, but they soon realized that they were no match for him. "We have to get out of here," shouted King Vegeta, as he and his crew retreated to their ships. As they blasted off from the asteroid, Cars let out a sinister laugh, turned back into a statue again and was sucked into the wormhole. "What was that?" asked Paragus, his hands shaking. "I don't know, that certainly wasn't the statue of legend. But we need to be careful," replied Brawly. "There's something strange going on in this part of the galaxy." One space pod entered the orbit of Earth. Fasha had been in a low metabolism state for a long time. As she opened her eyes, she saw the breathtaking view of the Earth below her. She felt a sense of wonder and amazement as she looked out of the window of her space pod. As she looked down at the blue and green planet below her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The planet was unlike anything she had ever seen before. She could see the vast oceans, the towering mountains, and the endless forest stretching out as far as the eye could see. Fasha smiled to herself. She couldn't wait to explore and see what this new planet had to offer. But she had to wait for the others. Her excitement was short-lived as she noticed a flurry of asteroids heading straight towards her pod. Fasha's heart raced as the asteroids collided with her pod, causing it to shake and spin out of control. She tried to hold on as tightly as she could to her seat, hoping for a safe landing, but the impact was too much, and she felt her body thrown around as the pod crashed through the Earth's atmosphere. The heat was intense as the pod made its way through the atmosphere, leaving behind a fiery trail in its wake. Fasha braced herself for the worst, but she was determined to survive. She closed her eyes and focused all of her energy on staying alive. Chapter 6: A Saiyan Surprise, Dinner and a Crash Landing with the Joestars. Joseph, Abdul, and Suzuki stepped out of the private plane and onto the bustling airport. They were all excited to finally see Holly after receiving her urgent call. They waited patiently, looking around for Holly's familiar face among the crowd. Suddenly, a man rushed by with a heavy suitcase and accidentally ran over Joseph's foot. Joseph winced in pain and fell to the ground, clutching his knee. The man was immediately concerned and apologized profusely. He asked if Joseph was okay and if he needed any help. Joseph's initial anger and pain turned into a mischievous grin as he realized the man was Japanese. Joseph picked himself up from the ground and stepped on the man's foot, causing him to yelp in pain. "Hey, watch where you're going," Joseph scolded before revealing the reason for his visit. "My daughter Holly married a Japanese man 20 years ago. They moved here, and my grandson never gets to see his grandfather. That is why I will never forgive the Japanese." He starts shaking his fist in frustration. The man nodded in understanding and began to gather his belongings from the opened suitcase, but Joseph doesn't seem to be paying him any attention. His eyes are fixed on something that has caught his attention among the scattered items on the ground. The man picks up a signed photo of a familiar face. He heard sobbing. He turned and saw it was his daughter Holly. She screamed the name of her husband, Sadao Kujo. Joseph saw the signed photo of Sadao Kujo and his heart sank. He remembered how happy Holly was when she first introduced Sadao to him and how proud she was when they got married. He felt a pang of regret for not being there for his daughter when she needed him the most. As he looked back at Holly, He could see the tears streaming down her face. Joseph knew he had to be strong for her. He put his arm around her and asked her what had happened. Holly explained that Sadao had ditched the family when Jotaro was young, pursuing the life of a jazz musician. The only thing we hear from him is the checks in the mail. Joseph felt a lump form in his throat as he tried to console Holly. He couldn't believe that he had missed out on so many important moments in his daughter's life. He knew he had a lot of catching up to do, and he was determined to make things right. Avdol and Suzuki stood by, offering their support to Holly and Joseph. The man who had accidentally bumped into Joseph was still there, looking embarrassed and apologetic. Joseph shook his head and said, "Don't worry about it. We've got bigger things to worry about now." As they gathered the spilled contents of the suitcase, Joseph couldn't help but feel grateful for this small act of kindness. It reminded him that there were still good people in the world, even in the midst of his own personal turmoil. They quickly drove to the police station. They walked down the rows of cells and stopped in front of Joseph, who was about to drink a can of soda. Jotaro raised the can above his mouth as opened the can and poked a hole in the can, letting the soda out of the hole into his mouth below. "Jotaro, come with us," said Holly. "I can't leave." Joseph raised an eyebrow at Jotaro's explanation, understanding but making Jotaro explain even more. "Possessed by an evil spirit? What do you mean?" he asked. Jotaro looked up at him, his expression serious. "It's a long story," he said, taking another swig of his beer. "But the short version is, I can't control my actions. This spirit, it's taking over my body." Joseph frowned, trying to make sense of it all. Suddenly, the officer interrupted, noticing the beer in Jotaro's hand. "Hey, how did you get a beer in here?" he asked, sounding irritated. Before anyone could respond, the evil spirit possessing Jotaro suddenly took hold of the officer's gun and brought it into the cell, pointing it at Jotaro's head. Joseph and the others stepped back, alarmed. Jotaro, however, didn't seem fazed. He calmly reached out with his own hand and grabbed hold of the gun, holding it steady. Without a word, he pulled the trigger, but instead of a loud bang, there was only a soft click as the bullet was caught between the evil spirit's fingers. Joseph watched in amazement as Jotaro slowly lowered the gun and set it back down on the floor. "I told you," he said simply, taking another sip of his beer. "I'm not in control here." The officers and other prisoners stood there dumbfounded. "What just happened?" said the officer. "He can move objects with his mind," said a prisoner backing away from the cell bars next to him. Joseph, Suzuki and Avdol looked in fascination as understanding dawned on their faces. Joseph's eyes widened in surprise. "He has a stand," he said, nodding in understanding. "It's a manifestation of his fighting spirit, a powerful ability that can manipulate reality." Holly looked at Jotaro in concern. "Is it dangerous?" she asked. "Yes," Joseph replied, "it can be very dangerous if not used properly." Avdol stepped forward. "I am also a stand user," he said, holding up his hand and summoning a flame that danced on his palm. "Perhaps I can help you with your situation, Jotaro." Jotaro nodded in agreement, relieved to have found someone who understood his predicament. Joseph, Holly, and Avdol watched as Suzuki approached Jotaro's cell, holding out her hand with a small, translucent bubble hovering above it. Jotaro eyed it warily, but didn't resist as Suzuki brought the bubble closer to his face. "What is that?" asked Jotaro, curiosity getting the best of him. "It's something I learned during my travels," replied Suzuki with a smile. "It's a bubble of relaxation. It helps to calm the mind and soothe the nerves." As the bubble touched Jotaro's face, it burst with a small pop. A look of surprise crossed Jotaro's face, quickly replaced by a peaceful expression. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, visibly relaxing. Holly stepped forward and placed a hand on the cell bars. "Jotaro, we're here to help you," she said gently. "We won't leave you here." Jotaro's eyes opened slowly, and he looked at Holly, a faint smile on his lips. "Thanks," he said softly. "I appreciate it." Joseph and Avdol exchanged a look, both impressed by Suzuki's quick thinking. Avdol approached. "Now you understand that your evil spirit is a stand. It's time to name it." He took out a deck of tarot cards and shuffled it. He fanned out the cards. Jotaro took one. It was the star. Avdol took a deep breath before speaking. "The star is a powerful card, Jotaro. It represents hope, inspiration, and good fortune. It's a fitting name for your stand." Jotaro nodded, considering the name. "I like it," he finally said, looking at the card again before handing it back to Avdol. "Star Platinum, huh? Sounds strong." Avdol smiled. "It is. And now that you know its name, you can begin to understand its full potential." Holly approached and hugged Jotaro through the bars tightly. "I'm so glad you're okay, Jotaro," she said, tears in her eyes. Jotaro patted her back gently. "I'm fine, Mom. Everything's going to be okay now." Joseph, Holly, Avdol, Suzuki, and Jotaro looked around in alarm as they heard a loud noise coming from outside the prison. They felt the prison shake as a space pod crashed into the wall lodged in the on the top as everyone was flung back, Joseph and Avdol acting as a cushion for Suzy-Q and Holly. The occupant was shot out and collided with Jotaro. It was a female with a tail. Fasha screamed as the space pod collided into the wall of the building. She was ejected and collided with a tall, muscular man. They slid down the cell bars to the ground, Fasha groaning in pain as she hit the hard surface. She blacked out and quickly came to. "Ow, that hurt," Fasha said, rubbing her head as she slowly got up. She felt warm and safe. Big arms wrapped around her. She looked up to see a man knocked out. She sat up. He started to come to. "Get off of me, you pervert," Fasha yelled, pushing his arms away. "What just happened?" he muttered, still reeling from the unexpected collision. Joseph's heart raced as he heard the sound of the impact. The memories flooded back, causing his hands to shake. He remembered his epic horse race against Wamu, one of the Pillar Men who threatened to take over the world. Joseph had managed to defeat him, but not without sustaining severe injuries himself. The sound of the pod crashing into the wall brought back the same feeling of danger and fear he had felt during that race. Holly noticed Joseph's distress and reached out to him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Joseph, we're all here together," she said softly. Avdol placed a hand on Joseph's other shoulder. "Let's focus on the present," he said firmly. "We need to figure out what's going on and how we can help." Suzy-Q, with a determined look on her face. "We've been through worse before," she said. "We can handle this." His eyes slowly blinked open, and he sat up, looking around the room to see his friends gathered around him. "Thanks guys," he began, but his voice trailed off as his gaze landed on a peculiar scene in front of him. Jotaro had his arms around a girl who was laying on him. A tail. His eyes traveled to the wall, where he noticed a space pod stuck in the wall with its door open. He heard the sound of a camera going off twice. "This is going in my scrapbook of Jotaro, with it labeled First Contact," said Holly. Holly had a nice camera that was undamaged, and she had pulled it out of her purse. 2 photos came out ready to develop. He knew that she was going to give the extra to Jotaro. Holly put it all away back in her purse. Suddenly, they heard a commotion as the girl screamed, "You pervert!" Star Platinum, Jotaro's stand, gently picked her up and set her on her feet. Both Jotaro and the girl had blushes on their faces. "What is going on here?" Jotaro and the girl shouted, glaring at each other. I don't know. When I woke your arms around me," she blushed, "and then I felt your ABS through your—" "Enough," Joseph interrupted. The door to the cell broke off its hinges from the shock wave. It made a boom and a sound of metal as it hit the floor. That made Joseph close his eyes. He opened them to see Jotaro and the girl looking into each other's eyes. "Should we go? I already alerted the Speedwagon Foundation about this. They should be here with a crane to extract the space pod and patch the hole in the wall," said Avdol. "If that's okay with you, miss." The girl nodded. "Fasha, who are you people?" "My name is Jotaro," said Jotaro. "My name is Joseph," said Joseph with a smile on his face. "Holly, Jotaro's mother," said Holly. Suzy-Q said Suzy-Q. Avdol said Avdol. Just then, a group of people in blue uniforms arrived with a crane and tools. They got to work on extracting the space pod from the wall and repairing the damage. They followed the Speedwagon Foundation home. Fasha looking at the new world called Earth. She was in a machine called a car. She was in the back with Jotaro, her hand itching to be held thanks to her mating instincts that had activated. She knew it would get worse if she drew blood. But Jotaro looked forward with a frown, not paying attention. They passed trees as a house came into view. A small mansion, Japanese style. The group drove up to the entrance of the mansion. Fasha's eyes widened at the sight of it. She had never seen anything like it before. The intricate architecture was fascinating to her. As they stepped out of the car, she felt a cool breeze on her face, and the smell of freshly cut grass filled her nostrils. She noticed a koi pond nearby, and she walked over to it, mesmerized by the colorful fish swimming in the water. The Speedwagon members camped outside to study the pod. Jotaro led Fasha inside the mansion, Holly with a smile, and offered her some tea. Fasha was amazed by the traditional Japanese decor of the house. The walls were covered in paper screens, and the floors were made of wooden planks. She sipped the tea and found it soothing. After a while, Holly and Joseph showed Fasha around the house. She saw a room with traditional Japanese weapons, and another with a shrine dedicated to their ancestors. Fasha was fascinated by the culture and the history behind it. As the day turned to evening, they sat down to a delicious meal prepared by Holly. Fasha enjoyed the food, and she could feel her stomach full and satisfied. She watched as Jotaro sat silently, lost in thought, while Holly, Suzy-Q, Avdol and Joseph chatted about old times. Fasha could feel the urge to mate growing stronger as the night went on. She knew it was her Saiyan instincts taking over, and she tried her best to control it. But she couldn't help but feel drawn to Jotaro, who was still lost in thought. She wondered what was going through his mind. She found him intriguing, and she felt a pull towards him that she couldn't explain. The night ended with Fasha retiring to her room, where she tried to control her instincts as good as she could. She fell asleep, dreaming about the new world she was in and the strange, fascinating people she had met. Thanks for listening to this tale. Make sure you comment, like and subscribe and have a wonderful day.